Hello and welcome to Unit 5. Here we're going to be dealing with hypothesis testing. If you don't remember hypothesis testing, or you are still a little shaky about it, I recommend you to go to the Statistics Review on the Start Here tab and review a little bit. We're going to be looking at the uses of hypothesis testing, how they're used to determine whether a student has cheated, whether an athlete has cheated, or whether some kind of government programs are functioning or not. For instance, what would happen to unemployment insurance if there is a cut in budget expenditures? We're going to be looking at the notions of the null and alternative hypothesis. If you remember this from your statistics class, these are the basic first two steps in any kind of a hypothesis testing framework. We're also going to be looking at the two types of errors possible in hypothesis testing. If you remember, these are the type 1 error and the type 2 error. The type 1 error and the type 2 error, we can relate them to the likelihood of an innocent man being found guilty or a guilty man being found not guilty. We're going to put all those scenarios into some kind of context to really understand what the difference between a type 1 and a type 2 error are. Then I'm going to show you the hypothesis testing framework, the setting up of the null and alternative hypothesis, the setting up of our test statistic, the setting up of our critical values, and our critical rejection regions. We're going to be looking at single parameter tests, whether a specific coefficient is larger than, less than, or equal to something, and we're also going to be looking at one-sided versus two-sided tests. The workhorse for this kind of test is the so-called t-test. Then we're going to move on into the multiple parameter tests. Here, we're going to test the value of different coefficients simultaneously, something that we cannot do with the t-test. For that purposes, we're going to be using the so-called f-test. We're also going to be using the f-test to test restrictions on some models. We're going to review the notion of confidence intervals and how they relate to a two-sided hypothesis. And lastly, we're going to be looking at p-values. P-values being some kind of shortcut for the entire hypothesis testing framework. We're also going to be looking at the rejection regions graphically. What kind of tail are we going to use in a one-sided or a two-sided test, and how do we actually determine the rejection region for a hypothesis? Here to the left we have the rejection region for a one-sided test, where we only use one side of the probability distribution. That's why they're also called one-sided tests. And on the right panel we have a so-called two-sided test, when we're testing that a specific value equals something or not.